Alright everyone, so now that we've kind of talked about raster graphics and raster images, the other form of graphics we're going to deal with web development is the concept of vector graphics. Okay. I'm not going to go super in depth into vector graphics. If you want to take a course that's more geared around that topic, I suggest the Digital Media 4A class, which is Digital Illustration. That course will get a lot deeper into using vector graphics using a specific program, Adobe Illustrator. Okay. In this case, we're going to use a free vector graphics program called Figma. Link is in the, inside of the module, but basically this is what the website would look like. Like most websites, you have to sign up and create an account. Oh, it's being all weird on me, but Figma.com. There we go. So it'll probably look something like this, give or take. You can create an account, or if you have a Google account that you don't mind interacting with, you could do that. Alright. This is what Figma will look like once you log in. This is kind of the first page. What I'm going to do is simply go to where it says New Design File. Alright, and that's going to open up Figma. I want to talk a little bit about what vector graphics are before we sort of get into Figma. So, when we were inside of Photopea, I mentioned that Photopea images are built out of pixels. Actually, here's this image that we just built. And you can see all of the pixels here. They're arranged in rows and in columns, right? Vector graphics are a little different in that there are no pixels, okay? Instead, the way that it works is with vector graphics, instead of, building something by building up small pixels in a grid, doing it that way, we build shapes, okay? So you can build, for instance, a circle or a square or a triangle or something like that. And then you can kind of overlap or combine these shapes into a more complicated project. So the idea is with vector graphics, there are no pixels. Instead, there are vector graphics are images built using paths created by mathematical equations. Okay. So in other words, like, there's a mathematical equation to make a circle, right? This is talked about in geometry. Or there's a mathematical equation for a rectangle or a square shape, right? And so we're building graphics using mathematical equations rather than using individual pixels, like the way Photopea or Photoshop would work, okay? Now you might wonder, okay, why do we want to learn a new method? We just talked about, pixels. Why would we, want to use a different method? And the answer is there actually are some benefits to using vectors that raster graphics don't have. All right, the first one is that vector graphics have what we call infinite pixel density. Okay, so what that means is that when you had something, and this is something if you take a class on Photoshop you'd learn about, but if you were to take a raster graphic, this is a raster graphic. Let's say this is like I'm just going to shrink it so it's a little smaller. Oops. Let's say I take this image, this raster image, and then I blow it up. I make it larger. What would actually happen is it would start to distort, okay? When you blow up a raster or a pixel-based image larger than its original size, it starts to distort. That doesn't actually happen with vector graphics. So we would say that vector graphics have infinite pixel density, or in other words, you can basically enlarge the graphics to any size you want without distortion. All right. So you literally saw as I made that particular photo bigger, it gets distorted. It looks blurry, right? This is, we set it to 100. This is, it looks very blurry. Here, or when we start doing vector graphics, when I enlarge things, I won't lose any quality. Okay. 2 is vector graphics. This is less relevant for web development, but vector graphics have real curves. Okay. What I mean by that is the very definition of a raster graphic is it's built out of pixels, right? And what that means is essentially, oops, let me take that back. So if I try to make a curve, because I'm basically dealing with boxes or squares, I can never really have a true curve. You know what I mean? It's always going to be kind of stair-steppy. Once again, that's a problem because I'm building my my graphic or my image out of pixels. Vectors don't use pixels, so it doesn't have that problem. So if I want to make a something like this, there's a mathematical formula to make a nice curve. I don't have to build it out of pixels. So at the end, the result is vectors will have real curves, whereas raster images will not. If you ever see an image that's built in Photoshop or Photopea and has a curve, it's usually faked by using sort of blurry edges as an optical illusion. And finally, so this one is less relevant, but one that might be a little more relevant is vector graphics are smaller file sizes than raster graphics. Okay. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you go back to Photoshop or Photopea, either one, they're about the same. What makes these raster programs really powerful is the ability for me to highlight just one single pixel and move it, okay? I can select all the way down to an individual pixel. That complexity is also kind of its downfall in that because every pixel is independent of each other, the program has to think about every single pixel in your project. And as the project gets more complicated with more layers and whatnot, you start to get bigger and bigger file sizes. Once again, this is an issue because of pixels. Vectors don't have pixels. They just basically have mathematical formulas, and it's really not very hard for a computer to enlarge or to save a mathematical equation. So therefore, vector graphics are smaller file sizes than a raster graphic. Now, why is that relevant to us? Well, if you think about it, remember that the whole point of the internet is that there's a bunch of computers, right? These circles represent computers. And there's a file, and that file, computers are requesting from a computer to get that file. That file is being downloaded to various computers here. So the smaller the file size, the faster the file would download. You know what I mean? So, it's in the best interest of speed of your website for your files to be smaller. We call that usually being optimized. So this is where using like a vector graphic could be useful because vector